As summer tiptoed closer, my friends and I were bursting with excitement for sun-soaked days and carefree fun. But then June announced one of her famous parties, this time with an unusual twist. She passed around a basket, filled with slips of paper, each one revealing the costume we had to wear. People dipped their hands in, some grinning at what they found, others grimacing. My turn arrived, and my heart fluttered as I unfolded the slip. Bride. "Listen up, everyone," June declared. "I've paired the costumes. We have couples like Superman and Lois Lane, the Prince and Cinderella, and so forth." She began listing the pairs from her notes. When she reached bride, I raised my hand. So far, I was the only boy dressing as a girl, which was a delightful thrill for me, since I've never been shy about embracing my transvestite side. Next came groom, and that was Hugh. Hugh loomed nearly 8 inches taller than me and weighed at least 40 pounds more. Standing beside him would definitely amplify my dainty, bridal appearance. After June called out the rest of the costumes, I realized I was the only boy who had drawn a female character. Teasing broke out pretty quickly, especially when Hugh put his arm around my shoulder. Later, at home, I told my mother about the slip of paper. She let out a quick giggle before turning serious. "Well, I still have my wedding dress," she mused, "but it's so out of style, I wouldn't ask you to wear it. However, your Aunt Stacy works in the women's department at the store. She might be able to help." Mom phoned Aunt Stacy and filled her in on the situation. I saw Mom nodding a bunch, and when she hung up, she announced that we would head to the department store the following morning. I barely gave it a second thought. In my mind, all I needed was a wig and a dress. How hard could this possibly be? I had no clue how naive I was. Bright and early, Mom and I made our way to see Aunt Stacy. Apparently, I hadn't grasped just how elaborate it is to become a proper bride. Aunt Stacy led me to the bridal section, where I encountered the most intimidating woman I'd ever laid eyes on. She was built like Attila the Hun in a gown towering and broad, with salt and pepper hair pulled into a bun so tight it made her face look stretched. Honestly, she had more of a beard shadow than me, though I tried not to stare. Stacy introduced me, explaining that I needed to transform into a bride. "So, you want to be a bride?" The woman rumbled, her voice gravelly like rocks in a cement mixer. She then pointed to a tiny fitting room and instructed me to get undressed. Startled, I glanced at Mom, who just nodded in approval. Doing as told, I slipped down to my briefs, and then Mom joined me with a measuring tape. "Amanda says you're going to make a beautiful bride," Mom beamed. "How would she know?" I whispered. "She looks like a truck driver." Mom shot me a scolding look and hushed me. "Behave and put on this robe," she ordered. "I'll be back in a few minutes." I could only sigh, half dreading, half anticipating the next stage of this peculiar bridal adventure. When Mom returned, she handed me a pair of panties before placing the rest of the items on the bench. She motioned for me to slip them on, turning her back while I did. Then she wrapped a corset around my torso, watching as I struggled to fasten the hooks running all the way up the front. Once it was secured, she proceeded to tighten the laces. Gasping for air and barely able to catch my breath, I saw her smile in that way she always does when she knows I'm struggling. Next, she slipped something into the built-in bra. I was then instructed to sit and pull on a pair of nylon footies, the kind you find at shoe stores when women are trying on shoes. After wrapping the robe around myself, I followed Mom out of the small booth. "Stand over there, child," Amanda ordered, pointing to a small, raised platform. I stepped up, doing my best to balance on the heels. Amanda measured my waist, bust, and hips while Mom and Aunt Stacy stood by, watching quietly. A size 10, I think. Let me grab a dress for her to try on. It was returned, so you're getting a good deal. Asterisk her. Asterisk, I thought, feeling a bit of the frustration and embarrassment begin to bubble up inside me. Amanda left me standing there for what felt like an eternity before returning with a large plastic bag. Mom helped her pull out the dress, and they quickly slipped it over my head. I could feel the cool satin brushing against my skin as it was tugged down, zipped up, and settled into place. The dress was a sea of white satin and lace, and as I looked down, I couldn't help but notice how low-cut it was, exposing far too much of my fake breasts. The dress fit snugly across my torso, flaring out from my waist, but it was far too long and trailed along the floor. The women didn't seem to care about the length. They simply had me stand there while they adjusted and fidgeted with the fabric. Aunt Stacy held a pair of white shoes in her hands and helped me slip them onto my feet. I managed to stand there in the heels, though walking was a whole different challenge. "She needs a smaller waist, more breasts, of course," Amanda remarked, "but this will do for now. She'll be beautiful after you remove all the hair on her legs, style her hair, and do the proper makeup." "I agree," Aunt Stacy nodded. "I'll take care of that." "She does need a bigger bust and hips," Amanda added, "but I have just the thing. Let me get it for you." I could feel my heart sinking. This was quickly escalating from uncomfortable to downright overwhelming. Mom had that amused yet slightly knowing look on her face. Aunt Stacy smiled gently, and Amanda seemed to be eagerly digging through racks and shelves to find whatever it was that would help mold me into the perfect bride. Amanda returned with some boxes and handed them to Mom. Then, with some effort, they helped me out of the dress. I hurried to get dressed, but Mom insisted I keep the corset on, saying it would be better if I wore it for a while to break it in. All I could do was remove the padding from the bra, but even then, I was left with small but unmistakable breasts poking out beneath my shirt. Aunt Stacy and Mom handled the payments, while I rushed out to the car, desperate to avoid any further attention. Once we got home, Mom didn't say a word until we were inside. Then she told me to go to my room and undress. Once we arrived home, I hurried to my room, stripping away my clothes as fast as I could. I still wore the panties while Mom loosened the corset laces. The moment it came off, I breathed a massive sigh of relief until I noticed what she was holding, a quivering breast form that looked astonishingly real. "This party is only 5 days away, which is barely enough time for you to learn how to move around in a dress, let alone heels," Mom began, "so I believe you should spend some time living as a girl. That is why Stacy brought these outfits for you to try." "How much time are we talking about?" "From now until the party, of course." "But why?" "All I need to do is wear the gown and show up." She folded her arms. "Because being a bride is one of the most significant milestones in a girl's life. You need to take it seriously by doing your very best, which means embracing girlhood for a week. Besides, you'll be getting your hair and nails done on Saturday, and I doubt you want to walk into the salon as a boy, then leave as a boy wearing bridal hair and fresh nails." I swallowed. "I guess not, but my hair is not long enough." "It is long enough. You just are not used to styling it that way. Debating with my mother is like talking to a wall. She might hear you, but your words simply bounce off." "Do I really have to?" she answered. "I think you should." I could tell there was no room for argument, especially with that determined look on her face. Resigned, I sighed and allowed Mom to slather a special cream over my skin. After a brief wait, I showered it off, and every bit of my body hair washed away, leaving me silky smooth. Next, she grabbed the adhesive without even reading the instructions and carefully pressed the breast forms onto my chest. When I glanced in the mirror, I nearly panicked. I now had 2 incredibly realistic breasts jutting out, with no sign of a seam. But she was not finished. The hip padding was fashioned as a special panty, which I had to wriggle into, and once I managed to pull it on, every trace of my male anatomy vanished. In its place was a small triangle of hair, just as I pictured a girl might look. Mom handed me the original panties again, and I realized they finally fit the way they were supposed to, forming a neat wedge at my crotch. "Put this on for now," she instructed, handing me a bra. I glanced in the mirror and gingerly lifted my new curves, stunned by how simple it was to eliminate my masculinity and replace it with a feminine figure. Mom smiled encouragingly and fastened the bra straps, and I noticed my breasts practically overflowed the cups. Following her direction, I perched on the bed and pulled on a pair of pantyhose before accepting a short dress. I slipped it over my head, and once she zipped it up, I stepped into a pair of heels. One look in the mirror made my knees wobble. Even without makeup, with my hair a tangled mess and my posture stiff, I looked unmistakably like a girl. Worse or better, depending on your view, it would not take much more effort to complete this strange and exhilarating transformation. Mom had me slip out of the dress before guiding me to her bedroom, where she gave me a full makeover. She brushed and blew out my hair, twisting it around a curling iron, then smoothing it with gel and a generous spritz of hairspray. Once she finished, I looked in the mirror and realized my suspicions were correct. This transformation was more convincing than I ever imagined. When I returned to my own room and pulled the dress on again, Mom stood back and surveyed me. Now, she announced, we need a name for this pretty new girl in our midst. I kept quiet, unwilling to hand over any ideas, but she hardly hesitated. I think Nancy will suit you perfectly. Now that we have settled that, she went on, you can keep doing whatever you normally do, but remember, you are a girl for the week, and I expect you to act like one. My heart fluttered once she left the room. I was standing there dressed as a girl and looking fairly convincing too. A whole week like this loomed ahead of me. Would I stay hidden in my room the entire time? That thought vanished when Mom called for Nancy. Deciding it was safe with just the two of us, I hurried downstairs, stumbling a bit in the unfamiliar heels. The moment I reached the bottom, I froze in my tracks. June stood there, mouth agape. She must have come by to talk about the party, but now she was staring at me in my feminine attire. I dropped by to let you know you do not have to be a bride, you really, Nancy. Mom suddenly called, her expression alarmed as she held up the instructions for the breast forms. When I put these on you, I did not read this part. It says most attempts to remove them could damage the skin, leaving scars or worse. The earliest they can safely come off is in 10 days. 10 days? Mom. She sighed. I am so sorry, honey. On the bright side, the party is only 6 days away, so once it is over, you'll just have to wait a little longer before we even try to take them off. What if they will not come loose? Then we keep waiting until it is safe, she answered grimly. Great, I muttered. June had overheard everything. She stared at me for a moment, and when Mom laid out all the details, June's eyes flickered over my fully feminine figure. So, he has to stay as Nancy for 10 whole days, she asked, sounding both astonished and amused. That is right, Mom confirmed. But please do not tease him. It was my oversight after all. June smirked. With those looks, she should be more worried about guys hitting on her everywhere she goes. Mom and June both stared at me for a moment. Then June turned to Mom and asked if I had enough clothes for the full 10 days. Mom explained that Aunt Stacy had loaned me a few of her outfits, at which point June invited me to join her on a trip to the mall so we could buy clothes that actually fit me. My immediate, adamant response was no, of course. I figured I could just wear my regular clothes, maybe with a beret if absolutely necessary. Why would I want to add more feminine items to the handful I already owned? Well, June said she definitely needs her own panties, plus another bra, maybe some simple flats and a skirt. Why not go together? That way, I can help make sure Nancy has everything she needs. Mom, I protested. Mom ignored my alarm and instructed us, you girls wait here. I will get our purses and then we can head out. After she left, June and I locked eyes. I never thought you would look so good, I ventured. Yes, actually better than good, you are very pretty. I scowled a little. I only did this for the party, June. I am not into dressing like a girl, and you know it. She winked. We will see. Mom soon returned with a black purse for me, already stuffed with my wallet, a brush, lipstick, and tissues. She was clearly not open to a debate. I froze in the doorway, hesitant to step outside in full feminine attire, but June gently took my hand, urging me forward. With a breeze drifting through my underwear and anxiety nipping at me, I somehow made it into the car. June slipped into the back seat, where I could not see her mischievous grin or the sparkle in her eye. Our first stop was the lingerie section of the same store where I was getting the wedding dress. A wall of perfume-scented air hit me, and Mom and June immediately began scouring the racks for suitable undergarments while I tried and failed to blend in behind stacks of lace panties. "Nancy, while you are over there," Mum's voice carried across the department, "pick out some underwear you like, but remember, they need to be cotton." My cheeks flamed. I scanned the shelves, clueless about what to choose. Many had bright designs on the front, so I opted for a package of plain white ones. Moments later, Mom and June approached with a bra in hand, and I silently passed them the panties. June giggled while Mom paid for everything. "Off we go, girls," Mom announced with a smile. "We still need to get Nancy a few skirts, some blouses, and a new pair of shoes." It hardly matters how it happened, but I ended up leaving the store with 2 new skirts, 2 blouses, 2 pairs of shoes, and damp underwear. We dropped June off at her house. She promised to visit again tomorrow. Then Mom drove us home and insisted on showing me the correct way to put on a bra. Considering I would be wearing one for at least 10 days, I had no real choice. It is not the breast forms themselves I despise. It is the fact that I must now dress as a girl for so long, and worse yet, I turned out to be attractive in this form. Once we were done, I found myself in a short green wraparound skirt paired with a white pullover top, plus black heels and pantyhose. One glance in the mirror, and I knew most people would never guess I am actually a boy, not unless I told them. The top hugged my chest, making the bra's outline barely visible, and the skirt's mid-thigh hem showed off some surprisingly shapely tan legs. Mom only made a quick comment about liking my appearance. Feeling both embarrassed and strangely self-conscious, I sat to watch television for a while, until the front door flew open and in walked Aunt Stacy. "I scheduled the Salon appointment for Saturday morning," she announced. "That way, we will have the entire day to get you ready before the party." "Fantastic," I said, trying not to sound too sarcastic. She just smiled and went straight to the kitchen with Mom. I wanted to follow them to learn what they were plotting, but if they were merely chatting, I knew I would become the prime topic. Instead, I stayed where I was and flipped on the television. Each step I took made strands of curled hairbrush across my ears. The bouffant look was quite stylish, but every time I caught a reflection of myself, I wondered who that girl in the mirror was. My fingers drifted to my thigh, grazing the silky nylon that covered newly smooth skin, and though I secretly loved the sensation, I would never tell a soul. About an hour later, the phone rang. Mom picked up, speaking in hushed tones. When Aunt Stacy headed home, Mom began making dinner, and I set the table like usual. Just as I got the plates out, the doorbell chimed, and Mom let Hugh inside. The minute his eyes landed on me, a huge grin lit up his face. "June told me you were a total fox," he announced, "and she was right, you look amazing." "What? What are you doing here?" I stammered, my cheeks hot. "I came to see my bride, of course," he winked. "And you look beautiful. I cannot wait to arrive at the party with you, Nancy." "Neither can I," I responded, unable to think of a good retort. "That is wonderful. I do think we should spend some time together beforehand, since we are playing bride and groom." Mom seemed quite taken by Hugh's handsome presence, and I got that uneasy sense she was already siding with him. Standing beside him, even in heels, only brought my eyes to about his chin, and he kept beaming down at me. "How about I take you out to dinner tonight?" he offered. Before I could speak, Mom announced she was perfectly fine with the idea. "Nancy needs more practice being around people as a girl," she pointed out, "and dinner in public is a perfect start. Do you not agree, Nancy?" I wanted to plant a swift kick in her shins, but of course I did not. Either I could say no and anger everyone, or go along with the plan and try to keep Hugh's hands where they belonged. Mom handed me the same purse and told me to freshen my lipstick, so I did. In a last-ditch effort to avoid leaving, I reminded them both that as soon as possible, I would go back to my real self and end this charade. Mom merely smiled, while Hugh offered me his hand. I did not take it, but trailed him out to his car and buckled myself in, hoping I was safe. His look made me feel like a nervous rabbit caught in a bear's gaze. Despite missing my old identity, I had to admit wearing a skirt was not terrible once I got used to the breeze down there. I also realized, to my reluctant surprise, that I looked pretty good. Given I had 10 days stuck in this role and everyone seemed to accept me this way, I toyed with just going with the flow. But if I did that, would Mom and the others assume I liked dressing as a girl? Or would it simply make my life easier over the next week and a half? Hugh was known for his skills with the ladies. Some of my friends admired him for it, and now he was focusing on me. He knew perfectly well that I was a male, so why was he so eager to take me out to dinner? And why was that grin plastered across his face? He drove us to Fours, a trendy restaurant in town. We kept our chat light until he asked why I had mentioned being gone in 10 days. I explained Mom had not read the directions before attaching the breast forms. I expected sympathy, but all I got was another brilliant smile. Suddenly, he slid closer, sitting right beside me. Alarmed, I pressed my knees together, rested my hands in my lap, and forced a smile right as his hand settled on my thigh. My first instinct was to leap away, but he remained utterly calm. "Relax, Nancy," he murmured. "I do not bite." "I am not a girl," I whispered sharply. "You were not before, and maybe you will not be later, but right now you are. I just want to be your friend." "You already are my friend, Hugh. A closer friend, Nancy." I understood exactly what that implied. Determined to tell him it would not happen, I turned my head, bringing us nose to nose. His lips brushed mine, gentle at first, but I was so stunned I did not pull away. Then he kissed me again, harder, with undeniable passion. I broke free, mortified and frightened, my entire body shaking. He wrapped his arm around me, and once more his lips pressed against mine. This time, it stretched on, until I shoved him back and demanded he take me home. The moment he parked in our driveway, I bolted from the car, hoping to avoid any further kisses. Inside my room, I tore off the makeup, tossed aside my clothes, and prepared for bed only to discover a nightgown lying out. I pulled it over my head and slid under the covers, unable to sleep. My mind churned with the memory of Hugh's lips, his aftershave lingering in my nose, the warmth of his hand on my shoulder when he drew me in, and how my insides felt like quivering gelatin. If he told anyone we had kissed, I shuddered at the thought. Hugh called me every day after that, though I steadfastly refused to see him. Mom did not understand why, and there was no way I would tell her. I survived the week up to Friday without further drama, although I did wear a skirt or dress every single day. Under Mom's guidance, I got the hang of applying makeup fairly well, not that I was thrilled about it. Saturday morning arrived, and Mom told me to wear jeans and a blouse with gym shoes, plus no makeup, for my Salon appointment. Together with Aunt Stacy, she let me inside, and I knew they would handle my hair and nails, though I had no idea what else might happen. Aunt Stacy had everything arranged already, and a woman named Debbie took me by the hand, leading me into a small changing area. "Take off your clothes down to your panties," she instructed, "and slip this robe on, dear." No explanation, nothing else. She left me alone, so I peeled off my clothes, put on the robe, and peered through the door. Debbie was waiting. She guided me into a small room with a chair that reminded me of a dentist's office. Wordlessly, she smeared some kind of green paste over my entire face, leaving only my eyes and mouth free. Then another woman entered, knelt down, and began clipping and filing my toenails. When she finished, she painted them a bold shade of red. As soon as that dried, she turned to my fingernails, trimming, buffing, sanding, and then added extensions, starting the whole process again. By the time she finished, each fingertip was capped with that same vivid red, shaped into a long, rounded point. Once the polish set, Debbie returned and, with a sudden yank, tore the face mask away. It stung a little. I pressed my fingertips to my face, shocked to find silky smooth skin where I had sensed a slight stubble before. That left me with a sinking sensation in my gut. Debbie helped me up and took me back to the main salon area, where several women lounged in matching robes. I settled into a new chair, head tilted back against a cushioned rest, and Debbie began plucking my eyebrows. I was too startled to protest, and she assured me she was only thinning them for a prettier shape. When she was done, she washed my hair, trimmed it, then put in rollers and doused it with some rather awful-smelling solution. After half an hour beneath a dryer, a girl named Kim appeared and artfully applied my makeup. Once she finished, Debbie removed the rollers and started brushing out my hair. Mom handed her what looked like a length of wire adorned with pearls and white flowers, and Debbie wove it into my freshly styled locks. It took a while, but eventually she spun my chair to face the mirror. I barely recognized myself. My hair was swept up from the sides, tumbling in ringlets around my face. The pearl-studded wire glimmered on top of my head, small white flowers sprouting in every direction. My eyebrows, now arched and tapered, framed eyes defined by plum, gray, and green shadow, lined in black, with lashes curled to a fluttery pitch. My lips, stained bright red to match my nails, looked somehow fuller, my teeth gleaming. I felt rattled to the core. If Hugh had been drawn to me before, he would have no trouble falling at my feet now. Both Mom and Aunt Stacy looked positively stunned the moment I stepped out of the salon, but neither of them said a single word. I swept right past, heading straight for the car. As I walked, I realized, somewhat to my own shock, that I liked the way I looked. Maybe being a girl could be fun provided I ignored the reality that I was not one. Mom drove us home, and we ate a quick lunch. Then all three of us gathered in her bedroom. While I stripped down, Mom laid out everything on the bed, starting with white satin panties. I slipped them on, then braced myself for the white satin corset. Once it was snug around my torso, Mom tightened the laces so much that my waist shrank to a tiny 24 inches, while my breasts were lifted prominently into the built-in bra cups. Hardly able to bend, I giddily slid the white nylons up each leg and let Mom fasten them to the corset's garters. Standing up, I studied myself in the mirror, a knockout figure, shapely legs that seemed endless, and a cleavage that made me blush. I could not help but smile at the reflection. I think Nancy is enjoying this. Aunt Stacy teased. That's pretty clear, Mom added. Just pray she does not decide to run off and get married tonight. She is dressed as a bride, after all, Aunt Stacy quipped. Rolling my eyes, I let them have their fun. Carefully, they slipped the wedding gown over my head and zipped it up, after which I stepped into a pair of white satin shoes. Mom busied herself with a few final touches. One look at myself, from the halo of pearl accents to my perfectly applied makeup and generous décolletage, made me catch my breath. The sleek satin straps clung delicately at the edges of my shoulders, narrowing to a trim waist before exploding into a billowing skirt of white. Everything about me screamed bride. I have something for you, Nancy, Aunt Stacy murmured. She came closer, fastened a diamond and pearl earring into each ear, then clasped a matching necklace around my throat, the sparkling pendant resting just above my enhanced bust. Mom dabbed her finest perfume on me, and the two of them declared me ready. Stay upstairs, Nancy, Mom instructed. I will call you when Hugh arrives. But I was supposed to meet him there, I protested. He called and said he would pick you up himself, Mom said. That is all I know. Just relax. He will be here in a bit. What else could I do? I perched on the bed, Aunt Stacy by my side. You look magnificent, Nancy, she said. A bride any mother would be proud of, and any man too. Thanks, I guess. Relax, she said, smiling. It is only a party, right? Then why go to all this effort? I asked, half laughing. Because it is the proper thing to do, she replied. That was when the doorbell rang, and Mom called my name. Aunt Stacy helped me gather the skirt as I made my way down the stairs, careful not to trip. There in the family room stood Hugh in a tuxedo, his eyes lighting up the second he saw me. Mom insisted on snapping a few pictures, posing us side by side as she issued directions. Then Hugh opened the front door, and I spotted a limousine parked outside white, with 3 doors on one side. He offered his arm to help me in, and soon we were on our way to June's house. We pulled up by her front door, and once again he assisted me out of the car. Holding up my dress, I followed him into the house. I expected to find Superman and Lois Lane, maybe Cinderella and her prince, But what greeted me instead were all the guys in tuxedos and all the girls in glamorous dresses, 6 of them in nearly matching gowns. I did not need a second hint to figure out June's plan. She had completely reinvented the party as a wedding, with Hugh and me as the stars of the show. The moment we stepped onto the patio, people started clapping and cheering, and I felt my cheeks heat up as I leaned into Hugh's arm, desperately trying to project the confidence of a real bride. One glance at everyone's faces told me I had stunned them completely. Between my styled hair, manicured nails, cinched waist, and eye-popping cleavage, I must have been quite a sight. I had no inkling that June intended to turn this into a mock wedding. At first, with costumes, it was all harmless fun. Now it felt like something else. Most of the boys kept their distance, but the girls gathered around, welcoming me like I was one of them. "You look amazing. I never imagined you could ever look like this," one said. Her mom chose the name Nancy. Once she realized how he looked when dressed up, added another. They fiddled with my gown and admired my hair, but Ivy took a closer look. "Wow, your eyebrows have been trimmed and shaped," she noted, "and look at your nails, those are acrylics." "What's so strange about that?" I asked innocently. The Salon girl said it wasn't a big deal, and Mom likes how it makes my fingers look thinner. My question only made them stare wide-eyed. "You do realize," one of them ventured, "acrylic nails are made to last a long time. Sure, you can remove them, but it's painful and time-consuming." "You mean I'll be stuck with these long nails even after next Thursday?" I blurted. They all nodded, and I felt that pit in my stomach again. Across the patio, June rapped on the buffet table and said we should begin. Hugh left my side to wait by a makeshift altar, while the girls acting as bridesmaids escorted me to the far end of the patio. Rod Stewart's music started, and they walked forward in a line, forming a row at the altar. Then the wedding march began. That was my cue. Someone placed a small bouquet in my hands, and before I realized it, I was making my way toward Hugh. My fingers clutched the flowers at my waist. Our class president, Kevin, stood next to me once I reached the altar. June stood before us and began speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we've gathered to unite our newest young lady, Nancy, with our resident heartthrob, Hugh." Nancy was reluctant at first, given that we all knew her as a he, yet look how beautifully she's transformed. And here is Hugh, the unsuspecting groom, who was probably nervous about the whole idea until he laid eyes on Nancy. She captured his heart right away. June turned to Kevin and asked, "Who gives this bride to this man?" "I and my classmates do," he answered. "Kevin, can you and your classmates accept Nancy as a woman, your friend, and a bride?" "We can," he replied. "Hugh, do you take Nancy to be your friend and classmate, to love and cherish, to date and keep from harm hereafter?" "I do," Hugh replied. "Nancy," June continued, "do you take Hugh to be your boyfriend and classmate, to love him, adore him, and then demand he spoil you?" I glanced around. Everyone beamed at me, reminding me it was just a game, right? "I do," I whispered. "Then I now pronounce you a couple," June declared, "and let no one come between you. Hugh, you may now kiss the bride." He turned to face me, and with everyone watching, he gathered me in his arms and kissed me. This time, his tongue slipped into my mouth, and for the first time, I did not draw back. After all, I had just vowed to adore him, right? Everyone present knew I was not really a girl, yet no one batted an eye at this public display. As his arms enclosed me, I felt myself surrender, and not because it was some silly game. Earlier, while I was alone waiting for Hugh, I studied myself in the mirror, actually liking the reflection I saw. Initially, my vision of what I might look like as a girl seemed purely imaginary, until I dressed fully and realized how much I enjoy being pretty. I liked the clothes, the makeup, and even having these new curves. So when Hugh's kiss grew deeper, I let myself relax and relish it. Tonight I was his bride, at least for the evening. No matter how I felt, soon enough I would revert to my regular self, and all this would fade into a fun memory. Right after the wedding, the bridesmaids hurried me off to June's bedroom, insisting I needed to change. Since I had not packed extra clothes, I braced for whatever they had planned. The moment the door clicked shut, leaving just my maid of honor, June, and Ivy, June revealed a short white dress for me to wear. Ivy unzipped my gown, and they helped me wiggle free of it. "Wow," Ivy gushed. "Look at you have a better figure than me. Satin panties too." I had made sure to keep everything neatly tucked away, leaving a smooth front just like every other girl in the room. "This is one of my dresses, Nancy," June said with a grin. "It's way easier to move in than that big gown." "Thanks, June, but as soon as possible. All this will be gone, and I will go back to being me." They snickered in unison and flashed me knowing smiles. "Not so sure about that," Ivy teased, "but let's see." June then slipped the little white dress over my head. It clung to me by thin spaghetti straps, the sweetheart neckline showing a good bit of my chest. It nipped in at the waist, emphasizing my figure, and ended a couple of inches above my knees, truly lovely with my white heels and sheer stockings. After I retouched my lipstick, we went out to the patio again, where Hugh was waiting. He clasped my hand as the music began, drew me against him, and we had our first dance alone, just like a newly married couple would. It was all very sweet, but I could not ignore how odd it felt for two boys to dance together. By midnight, every guy there had taken a turn with me on the dance floor, which gave me little chills. At last, Hugh announced it was time to go, and he took my hand in his. We made our rounds thanking everyone, and then he led me to his car. The limo had vanished. I hoped he might simply drop me at home, but deep down, I suspected otherwise, and I was right. Everything happened last year. By the time I arrived home that evening, I knew I could slide back into my old self if I wanted, though I was not certain that I did. I never mentioned anything to Mom, but from that night onward, I wore skirts and blouses every single day. Around 12 days later, my right breast form simply fell off. The glue had finally given in to gravity. My nails were still firmly attached, so I detached the other breast form, cleaned my chest, and promptly glued them back on. Mom, believing I was still patiently waiting for the adhesive to give out, said nothing. My Aunt Stacy, on the other hand, figured out the truth and told me as much, also revealing she had spoken to Mom. By then, I no longer cared. I'd only smiled at her. My hair kept growing, so I returned to the salon, where they trimmed it into a neat pageboy style. 2 months passed, and then one of my acrylic nails came loose, so I took off the rest and the breast forms too. It was the first time in months I dressed in my usual clothes, my hair tucked into a simple low ponytail. That lasted about a week. During that time, Mom said I became moody, short-tempered, unmotivated, and disheveled, and she demanded to know the reason. But how could I explain? Hugh tried calling a few times after that, but since I have returned to my male self, he lost interest. June dropped by occasionally, bringing snapshots from the wedding once. She seemed surprised that I had abandoned Nancy and hinted at somebody who was eager to date me, though she did not disclose any names. Hoping to lift my spirits, Mom suggested we spend time at the mall. Strolling past the shops, I could not stop gazing at all the delicate lingerie, the elegant dresses, everything I had begun to miss. Mom noticed my distraction, but held back her comments until we got home. Then she laid down the law, insisting I revive Nancy. It took me 1 full day to gather myself, but when I finally stepped out of my room, Nancy was back. The following day, I got a fresh set of nails and went to visit June, announcing my decision to return and remain as Nancy. That same night, Kevin called. We went out for dinner and then to a show, and at the end of the evening he kissed me. He confessed that he could not stop thinking about me, and over the next month, he helped me fully embrace myself as a woman. I no longer own a single stitch of men's clothing. The day I decided to toss it all was the day I stopped looking back. These days, I walk around in dresses, heels, and breezy blouses that dance against my new curves. My mother keeps telling me how proud she is, how she sees more and more of me every day, the real me that was hidden for so long. I am dealt a handful of hearts, and I'm perfectly happy playing it. My hips have settled into a gentle curve, and my waist has shrunk to a comfortable 25 inches, no corset required. In only a few months, my real breasts will grow in fully, and I can finally do away with the bra padding. I keep catching myself in the mirror, pausing in mild disbelief. I love the woman gazing back at me, a reflection of joy and confidence. And then there's Kevin, the man who swept me right off my 3-inch stilettos. We met on a casual afternoon at a local bistro. I was nursing a latte, attempting to keep my lipstick from smearing, when he strolled in. One glance, his warm smile, the way he seemed comfortable in his own skin, and I knew I wanted to talk to him. The rest was one smooth glide into a whirlwind romance. Candlelit dinners at little-known restaurants, walks along the riverbank where he'd hold my hand as though it was the most natural thing in the world, stolen kisses in the hush of evening when stars twinkled like promises in the sky. I've never felt so alive. With Kevin, every moment feels like it's lit from within. The first time I told him about my journey, how I was not born the woman he sees, he took it in stride. No shock, no recoil. He simply held my hands, looked into my eyes, and said, "I see you, and I love you just as you are." Our connection grew deeper. He offered something I'd rarely known: acceptance, free of judgment. He told me once, "Your strength is dazzling, like a diamond. Don't ever dull it. Each day, I find new facets of myself shining a little brighter because he sees them." But, as so often happens in life, there are twists we never expect. One warm afternoon, about 3 months into our relationship, I was waiting for Kevin at our favorite coffee shop, mild sun in the sky, the promise of spring in the air. He arrived, looking unsettled. At first, I feared the worst. Was he about to leave me? Had he changed his mind? He fiddled with the buttons on his shirt, clearly nervous. His gaze dropped to the tabletop, then rose slowly to meet mine. That was when he said something I couldn't have seen coming. "I've just learned I'm being deployed overseas," he whispered. "My unit's leaving in less than 2 weeks." My heart froze. For one breathless second, it felt as though the wind had been knocked from my lungs. He had never mentioned the possibility of military service, and I realized how badly I wanted him to stay. But how could I deny him the call of duty? Tears threatened, but I clenched them back. If he was strong enough to serve, I could be strong enough to stand by him. We spent the next week locked in a delicate tango of time, stealing every moment, every kiss, every memory. And I told myself I will wait. The day came when he had to go. I found myself at the airport, hugging him tight, burying my face in his shoulder. My mother had come along for support. Kevin and I exchanged whispered promises, hopes for the future, vows to keep in touch, to love fearlessly across the distance. A month passed, 2, then 3. Emails turned into letters, and letters into sporadic phone calls. My mother lent me her strength as she saw me pacing the hallway every time I expected a message from Kevin. One evening, while flipping through the last snapshot he had sent the two of us smiling in front of the coffee shop, my phone pinged. It was from Kevin. "I'm coming home. Early." I almost dropped my phone from trembling excitement. 2 weeks later, there he was, stepping off a plane, looking no less handsome but far more battle-worn. People were reuniting left and right, parents, siblings, partners. Me, I could barely stand still. Then I spotted him. Our eyes caught across the crowded terminal. Everything else fell away. He strode straight toward me, sweeping me into his arms in a fierce embrace. The tears finally broke free. Through my watery gaze, I noticed the faint smile on his lips and a glimmer of something else in his eyes, nervousness maybe. He reached into the pocket of his jacket and knelt. "Will you wait for me again next time? Because I plan on waiting for you forever." With that, he revealed a small velvet box. Inside lay a delicate ring, tiny diamonds sparkling in the overhead lights, as though each star from the sky had been placed in a circle. A hush spread. Everyone around us stilled, or so it seemed. My hand flew to my mouth. It wasn't just an engagement ring, it was a vow to a life together that spanned miles, challenges, and every curveball life could hurl our way. "I would wait for you forever," I managed to whisper, voice trembling with love and awe. He slid the ring on my finger. My mother stepped forward, tearful and smiling, her arms wide in acceptance. All at once, it struck me that just a year before, I had feared not being accepted, feared that my reflection in the mirror would cause confusion or rejection. Now I stood there in a flowy sundress, nails painted a delicate pink, my breasts finely blossoming into their own, my waist trim and feminine. This is who I am. This is who he loves. We kissed amid the cheers of strangers who had turned into witnesses of our moment. The swirl of joy, relief, and astonishment left me breathless. As Kevin stood, he whispered, "I love you, Nancy," and in that single phrase was every promise of our future. I had never felt happier. Together, we left the airport. We had a wedding to plan and a new, unexpected destiny to embrace. Sometimes, when I think about fate handing me a simple handful of hearts, I realize it wasn't just luck. It was my life unfolding exactly the way it was meant to. Yes, I was born in a male body. Yes, I discovered the woman inside me. And yes, I chose to stand proudly in the identity I'd found. I glanced down at the diamond ring, catching the light, and smile. Who knew that one impulsive costume party, one swirl of Satan, and a single harmless "I do" would lead me here? My name is Nancy, and my life, a true heart-filled draw, has never been more beautiful.